So today you get to hear from Chris Doty, Ken Flannery, Zach DeBoer, and he finally gets his own picture on the slide.
Hey,
Mike Mann. So please join me in welcoming everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone. It was nice to see you today. I appreciate your time here. Just kidding. It's great to see you all. It's great to see you all out here today. It's fun to see the trees turning colors. I love to see, if you look just out that window that way, right now, if you can look, it's like between the 18th and 9th, you see the tree that's turning bright orange behind there? That, to me, is fall. This is the perfect time of year. That's what Wisconsin offers us. That's what people come to Wisconsin for. So for myself, that's great. Start a little positive note. If you know myself, I want to tell you something first before I go big. It's a little bit of action about going big. And what I'd like to do is introduce somebody here who is now, I knew he was always certifiable, but he's now a certified financial planner. And that is Ken, oh wait, it's Mike Mann. He has now joined the ranks of those of us who take the massive courses to try to get there and sit down for these day-and-a-half long tests where you're sweating thinking you're pretty sure you didn't pass it. You're pretty sure that you were the ones who'll have to take it again. Wrong. So fortunately, there's 4 of us here who've kind of endured that cycle, and we now have the certified financial planner. It's one of the gold standards in our industry, so I really want to congratulate Michael. It's fun. I pretty much know what he's been doing for about the past year and a half, what he's done most every evening. When everybody's out going to party, oh no, you guys go. He's like in the office. You'll see his car there by itself. He'll be studying because that's where he studies best. So great job. Congratulations. Why don't you give a speech about that?
Absolutely. All right. So
we'll talk more. Congratulations, Michael. That's awesome. Going big. So going big for myself today, it's family. It's the challenges they present. It's the milestones they celebrate. It's offering them perspective. It's you. It's fall. It's autumn. It's dad jokes. For me, I've got a very, very, very long list. It's the tale of 2 cities. It's a fine line between things that are good and bad. It's a mindset that we carry. What I've been fortunate enough to do for 40 years is work on a mindset, changing my mind to look at things in a positive direction rather than negative. But for you, I would like you to take 60 seconds or so now, if you can. Grab your pencils. Ken, how about yourself?
Yeah, mine is Kohler Company, a little company, little town north of here, 45 minutes to an hour. So back in college, I used to be a butler at Riverbend Country Club, kind of much like this, right? So you got the American Club, then you have the old Governor's Mansion that they turned into a private membership club. And that's when I started hearing members talk about retirement planning, investment planning. It was very interesting to me. That's where it all started. I was 20 years old, a butler at a country club. So thank you. Mr. Kohler passed away about a month ago. I'm sure some of you know that. Well, 1 month ago. So I'm very grateful for Mr. Kohler, the opportunities that family, that organization has provided. Probably wouldn't be standing here without that opportunity there. Also, all of you. We wouldn't be standing here without all of you as well. So I'm thankful for the Kohler family. They have no idea who I am. But they employed my father for 20-some years. I was a butler at one of their organizations for 3 or 4 years as well. So they've done a lot for the community with golf, everything like that. So very grateful for the Kohler family in general.
I'm extremely grateful for many things. Today specifically, I'm grateful for going big. So beginning in gratitude, this exercise, I'm a part of a lot of different fitness communities downtown Milwaukee. We always get coffee afterwards, and a small group of us, we would go big, 2 or 3 of us, right? And one day we had 10 or 12 people all sitting around, all similar ages, and one person tapped me on the leg and was like, hey, we should go big. And I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. I was actually a little nervous about it because it's unnatural for a lot of people to share that. And it was extremely well received. People automatically connected with each other. It was like, wow, that was really cool. I'm not sure if everyone really appreciated it, but I'm super energized. And 2 weeks later, we had the same group. And the one that I thought appreciated it the least was like, hey, something I've been thinking about for the last 2 or 3 weeks was when we began in gratitude. Can we do that again? So I'm extremely grateful for all the connections and really just Gentian and the team we have here for that being a normal practice, right? Because we forget in our day-to-day lives how important gratitude is. So
I'm sincerely grateful for our partnership that we have with Raymond James. We don't really talk about Raymond James enough, I feel like, sometimes, and the things that they do for us when we're in the office, taking care of things, making sure that people are getting service the way that they should be, and that we're getting the service the way that, so that we can provide the best service that we possibly can. For those of you who don't know, Raymond James' home office is in St. Petersburg in Florida. And most recently, Hurricane Ian came through that area, and even with the hurricane, they had a business continuity plan that kept us updated throughout, and they were able to continue to service us without a hiccup during the hurricane. And we're just grateful that everybody that we've heard so far has been safe, and that Raymond James took the steps to be able to allow us to continue to do our jobs to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. So we appreciate there's been a lot of inflation. There's been a lot of things going on, a lot of reasons to be a little bit, there's war going on, there's annexation going on, there's retreat. I can't go through, anybody here seen anything on the news lately that seems a little bit negative? Okay, yeah. The beautiful thing about it, though, is that when it's countered with gratitude, those things happen, they have happened in the past. What's different this time? Let me tell you, what is in the news right now is there anything else possible? We literally have wars, pandemic. I went through the whole list of it, going, well, what else can happen? And people represent that fear with the market. The market is a temperature gauge for how people are feeling. When people feel really, really bad and fearful, guess what happens? The market drops, and drops pretty significantly for a time until they realize that fear was, oh, okay, it's going to be all right. I can still have Diet Coke at Blue Mound on a Thursday. I had to think about all those days. Anybody here, every day's a Saturday? Not me yet, but you told me that. As we go through, a lot of the tough times have gone out, and in this section for me is the questions we're hearing from you. We hear a bunch of questions, but here's what's very interesting. Right now, Ken was just in our parking lot. Tell him what you were talking to Bart about.
So there's a gentleman who does a landscaping. His name is Bart. His wife works at another financial institution in Mequon, fine firm, of course. They're getting a lot of phone calls right now because they have multiple advisors doing multiple things. And being disciplined to one strategy is not, I don't think, going on there. And I think that's a problem for some of those clients, some of those investors. But yeah, it just feels a little unfortunate that that's happening because it's not happening here, which is great. So thank you all for your faith, patience, and discipline, because I don't think we're getting those phone calls like maybe other people are as well. So.
Yeah, to many of this room, it's not your first recession with us. It's good to say, but I remember when we sat down, one person in particular, I remember one of our first clients here, when we sat down 3 recessions ago, 5 huge bear markets ago, and we've been through all of them together, it's perspective that we add together, and that's the key. One of our goals now is to help your children and your grandchildren become great investors like yourself. We obviously want to take care of you first as a priority, but a lot of you had that question. What can I do to make sure my kids save enough? Because it's not the world where they're at a company for 40 years and they have one plan and one this. They have a lot of fractured work. So that's something we're putting together for you as well. And this team we built is there for you. Because I remember when I sat down, particularly with Tom, he thought I was 12. I was 13. Looked it anyway. But I said, hey, I'm going to be here your whole retirement. And that resonated with him as well. My career will be during your retirement rather than choosing somebody your age who's retiring too. So what I'm building is a team of people who will be here through you and your family's retirement. But the questions we're hearing from you, first of all, how do I open my statement? Good. Don't need to open it right now. I'm just joking. So here's the questions. How can we protect from inflation? Well, just don't buy stuff. Okay? I'm going to answer them real quick. I'm joking on that, by the way. So inflation you've seen. Last night I went to, anybody here go to Costco? Anybody here buy 50 pounds of raisins for no reason whatsoever? We go to, for instance, just our grocery store, and normally about once a month it's a couple $100. What I noticed one time, it went from $200 to $300. Okay, do we buy something different? It was just the price of food. I've noticed this at Costco. My normal Costco bill's gone up 50%. Last night I took my daughter with me, so it went up 120%. It was a little different. But, inflation can also be by family, which is pretty funny. My wife will tell her that as well, which is even better. But inflation, anybody see her? It's been impacting us also in the price of gasoline and fuel, right? So you've seen that. That's how you most feel inflation. For most of our lives, though, we've had this thing called the microprocessor actually working against inflation. It's actually been reducing the price of this thing we all carry around, which is this little cell phone, right? This has been dropping dramatically. So inflation has been here. How's Ukraine impacting the markets? Well, it seems like every other day the Russians are going to come in, the Russians are out, the troops are coming in, they'll be re-involved. And then Putin said something just last week, which is, I will take all measures, including nuclear measures, to make sure that Russia wins. And we hear that and the market gets really frightened, right? Because it's true. But if he uses nuclear weapons, he can't use the land he's annexing. So he understands it. There's also some downsides to it as well. I was listening to some political pundits on it. But this is the questions we're getting for you. How much longer will this correction last? And I'm going to turn this over to Ken. So about 4 days ago, the market hit a pretty significant bottom. And then for 2 days, it went up 5%. What you'll find, though, is if you read, we're sending out Nick Murray's monthly client corner, which you'll like. But markets respond very similar to how they end. So I can't tell you when a bear market's going to end. But if it ends in a month where it goes down 4 or 5%, typically right behind it is 4 or 5% returns in a few days. So when it gets oversold and there's a ton of fear, you'll find that little spring, we like to call it, the spring was coiled. When you let it go, what happens? It tends to pop. It tends to go up pretty quickly. So we saw a 5% upturn and about actually 6 almost percent upturn in the NASDAQ in 2 days. Until yesterday, it kind of meandered and happened with some of those gains. But you'll see that. We don't know how long it'll last, but we know that when it ends, we're positioned well to take advantage of it. We'll talk more about that. What should I do with my cash reserves? So anybody here now excited that you can get 1.5% to 2% in money market? Oh my gosh, if I'd have told you that 10 years ago, you go, nobody wants that, right? But after getting point nothing, 1% to 2%, it's a pretty good environment, right, for savers. However, we're going to talk a bit about why that's not correct in a net basis. 10% inflation, 2% interest gives you a negative what? That's right. I was just making sure math was good here. Good. Why do my bonds have a negative return? We'll talk a little bit about that. Negative return happens when interest rates go up dramatically. Now, I've got a client here was in the commercial real estate industry for a long time. During your whole career, Dave, did you ever see rates go up this fast, this short, this quickly? Never. It's unprecedented. It's the worst fixed income market since 1848. Anybody here been alive since then? Nope. None of us. Did you say almost? I feel like it. I feel like it. But as we go through here, your bonds will have a negative return. We'll talk a little bit more about why. Will there be capital gains distributions at the end of this year? I want to tell you right now, yes, there are still possibilities of capital gains distributions in a negative return year because capital gains are when they bought Apple at $4 and it's trading at $150 now. If they sell some shares, they're going to distribute them. They try to offset them, but I want you to be prepared. A down market doesn't mean no capital gains distributions. We're going to talk about some strategies we have, though, to mitigate that as well. And then the last one is, how is Gentian doing? I get this one. This is how this often happens. Pulls me aside. Hey, Chris, how's Gentian doing? You know, like it's some big secret or something. Oh, shh. Well, we're doing pretty well. I just want to tell you that. Well, we're financial planners here. I take the same planning in the business. At any point in time, our business and our revenue is really essentially what happens with your accounts. At any point in time, our company can experience a 30 or 40% discount in all fees. And we have to be able to work within that. I'm a financial planner by nature, right? I also use that for our business. A lot of my friends, a lot of the people you see out there, don't. They take their highest revenue ever, which was January of this year, and guess what they do? That's their new level of standard. So I remember 15 years ago having a friend at one of these national conventions go, oh my gosh, he's just so worried. What's going on? What's going on, Mike? He goes, I just bought a new house. I just did this. I just bought all this stuff. So wait. You took that highest number that we had and you just made that look like this is the new level of spending? And the answer was, yeah, I learned a ton from that. Gentian is doing great due to your introductions, due to this team here, and our preparation for times like these. These are what we're prepared for. These are what we're preparing you for. You would hope that we're prepared for them. The answer is yes. We're here to take your phone calls. We're here fiscally. We're doing tons of research. We're making sure we're reading dramatically. That's a weird word. We're reading dramatically. Oh my gosh. That's kind of funny, isn't it? We are reading dramatically. How do you do that, Chris? Can you show me?
Yeah.
What we're doing behind the scenes. We're going to talk more about some of these, but we're reviewing portfolio holdings. Mike, why don't you touch base on what we've been doing on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we're taking a look at kind of right now is that fixed income portion of the portfolio. And what's really interesting is because of the year that we've had, it puts us in a position that we're able to actually buy certain bonds that are very high quality at valuations that we weren't able to see before. So we're taking a look at that and seeing if this is time in your individual strategies, if that makes sense for you, and different things like that. I think in the last, literally in the last 2 weeks, I've spent probably about 10 to 12 hours just being in meetings with that, and that's thinking that they actually went only for the 1 hour that they do, and our meetings always stop after that 1 hour mark, right? But yeah, so we've been working pretty hard on looking at some of these different strategies, continuing to review the portfolio holdings that we've had, and also holding our managers accountable. Are they still doing what we hired them to do, in the sense of, are they still sticking to their strategy? Are they still being disciplined and staying disciplined? It's a pretty unique thing in our business, but one of these managers actually works directly with us, as in we help them with their finances. And from that standpoint, we asked the question, why? And what he shared was, because you guys stay disciplined. We stay the course, we keep the faith, we don't try to make dramatic changes as we hear some people do. So those are all the things that we're continuing to look at and continuing to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. We're humbled. I mean, actually, you can see 2,000 and 3,000 advisors out there. He chose us. That's very humbling. We have quite a few who do and ask us to be their advisor. And we're like, well, why? And as he said, and I think he told Ken, because we stick true to our discipline. Nobody else does it. He goes, what do you say? You'd be surprised at how many people
You'd be surprised right now. You guys know, maybe small cap, as we talk about a category, small cap growth right now, maybe off 40% right now. It would be very easy for us to come in and say, hey, by the way, we should make a change in that category. That's very easy to say that right now. The discipline is to say, what goes down the quickest, most likely will rebound the quickest. So we're going to stay true to that. We know it works. It's worked well for a lot of you. And we're going to stay true to that discipline. Most advisors are not like that. Because to see a change, that's maybe what you're hoping for sometimes, that we do. Are you going to make a change? No. Here's the reason why. Are you going to make a change? Yes. Here's the reason why. So we like to stay true to that discipline.
Looking at cash alternatives, now, another thing that we're going to do here as well, looking at your cash holding alternatives and what's out there. So you've had cash in positions where it's been almost no return. The one thing I say is that with inflation, cash has actually had a negative return pretty significantly. We'll talk a bit more about that. We've been reading dramatically instead of for perspective. Reading dramatically, I don't know what that means, but I like it. Reading a ton for perspective on this as well. Evaluating ways to improve our deliverables. So we take one day, just so you know, one day every month to get better at what we do for you. How can we do what we do better? Again, across the nation, we're not concerned if other firms do it or not. We just know it's essential, something we need to do. And I got to tell you, this team here is phenomenal functioning. We have people come in and experts, a lot of times they go, you do what? So we try to take people's best practices and use them. They do. I want to make sure you understand that as well. So we take a day every month for about 6 hours and we do that. The next one is evaluating ways to improve meeting with industry experts, which Michael was doing, and then continuing education. So getting CFP, going to spend 3 days for tax planning like Can's going to do here in the next 2 weeks. He's going to spend 3 days talking about what?
Tax laws, inherited IRAs. I'm going alone. Does anybody want to come with me? Could be a fun trip. Kind of a fun guy once in a while outside the office.
I don't see any takers. I see no takers. Sorry, Ken. So just giving you an idea, behind the scenes there's a ton going on. The nice thing about this is, and again, we don't get a lot of chances to answer these questions for you, but you ask a lot of these, and I'd want to know, what is it you're doing? What are the things you're doing? This team has the ability. Now, when it was just myself and my business partner, you remember before, we could do a lot of this because we didn't have a ton of clients. But as we've grown, I was very concerned to say, I want people who can do this as well, if not better than I. So you're seeing this team here that's available to do that. Peter will go, Mike will go. I mean, anybody. Our team has gone to something for themselves to make themselves better. It's one of the things I challenge them on as a leader. So my role as a leader now is to make sure that we're doing the best we can for you. I just wanted to bring this up because sometimes you don't see it. You ever go to the car dealership and you get your maintenance done and it says, yep, all the things, all those boxes it checked, and the stuff they did you didn't even expect, like your wiper fluid, and then you press your wiper fluid thing and there's none in there? Didn't you? Doesn't say right? You checked that, right? Yeah. Right. Well, we have that kind of checkbox. Just before you go into your meeting, we put this out. We do all the research, not just before, but well before. And you'll see here, there's about 135 things we have here, and there's even more. But these are the things we check that you don't know that we check necessarily on each one of your accounts on a consistent basis, let alone your investments. This is yours. We just like to show you that kind of stuff because sometimes you wonder during these times, are they doing a whole bunch of? The answer is yes, we really are. But we're also eliminating things that are unnecessary. So this is very, very important. I just wanted to show you too. As we go across.
Before we go into markets a little bit, Chris mentioned a few things that we're doing behind the scenes. One of those is meeting with our centers of influence, which we call our masterminds group on a monthly basis. Pre-COVID, we had 26 people at our office going through different people in different industries with health insurance, with real estate, with lending, with estate planning attorneys, tax accountants, and others, because things are getting more and more complex. We also know that you have a holistic plan. A holistic plan is not just your investments, right? It's your estate planning attorney, it's your accountants, it's health insurance if you're 65 or older, or even retiring before then as well. So recently we've gone through the process of meeting in person again and actually interviewing centers of influence for you guys. People that we trust, that they're competent, but also people that we feel are a good fit for you guys as well. If a need comes up, we know somebody that has the same mindset, or we feel does, as far as gratitude, contribution, treating you guys well, and also just in response time too. And recently, as we've gone through some of those interviews, we've heard a bunch of different things. In the accounting industry, we heard that this is going to be the most complex year potentially ever for doing taxes.
Yeehaw!
So patience with your accountant this year. Last year, if you remember, if you had capital gains, a lot of those forms weren't distributed until March 15th, the very last day that they're allowed to do that. That may certainly be the case again. We also heard that transactions of $600 or more on Venmo will now receive a 1099.
And not just Venmo, insert Square, PayPal, the other ones too, Zelle.
So imagine the complexities with those if people are running businesses and having transactions continually going through there. And the estate planning side, we've heard issues with online legal documents where you feel like you have it covered, but then certain states don't actually accept those documents, or there's little pieces missing in them. In the health insurance industry, many of you have heard of or have experienced the donut hole if you're covered under Medicare. In 2025, we heard from our health insurance specialist that that is actually going to be eliminated. If you paid over $2,000, the max will now be $2,000, or that's at least the plan coming into 2025. So the reason why we have those, we leave really inspired because we feel like we're learning a lot from all these different industries that we physically don't have the time or the capacity to learn, nor legally can we actually give advice on a lot of these. But we want to find people that we trust that we can introduce you to. So the Masterminds one, the Centers of Influence is a huge one for us moving forward.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. We have 2 or 3 different groups we're putting together this, where we get 7 to 8 people, really have a nice intimate relationship, but talk to them. Because these are people you guys often ask us about. These are aspects we can use, that we can give to you and feed you. A new one that we're finding right now is called a third-party healthcare power of attorney. Anybody ever heard of that? That's where it came from. This is a beautiful thing to do, but in our sitting down, a third party can look and be your durable healthcare power of attorney if you don't want it to be a family member, or if you don't have a family member for it to be. A lot of times they don't want one family member doing it over another, but they want somebody else to carry this out. We also have third-party trust. You've heard that before, where there's somebody outside that will help administer your trust if you don't want it to be a family member and kids. But for healthcare, they're beginning to have this third-party relationship for durable healthcare power of attorney. Very kind of, for outside, I'm saying third-party healthcare. It's really cool to see, but these are the things as we start to see them, we make sure we investigate them. We want to bring those to you. Are those helpful? You want us to do that continually? Yes, but who here is still awake? All right. I see 2 people. That's great. So I'm going to do this. So let me ask you a question here. Who appreciates this incredible award-winning newsletter? Can I read you something? Pretty impressive. So I got a friend here. He manages a massive, he's got a big company anyway. Hey, buddy, we're coveting your newsletter. Is there someone who does it for you? We'd like to emulate it. You'd know who it is, but I'm not going to tell you. But that's how good this is. Now, you've got Ashley who's gone somewhere here. Where's Ashley? Come on. She's standing over there. So Ashley and Jenny are really the just fantastically created this. Why don't we give them a hand? I think it's fantastic.
Come on, Ashley. Come on.
I want to make sure they get the credit for this. I've been in this industry a long time, and I've yet to see a newsletter this good, mainly because I'm in it somewhere. And sometimes they'll put my poetry on it, which is even better. I'm like, I'll tell my poetry at home, and Deb's kind of like, no disrespect, it's just not her thing. But I'll have many of you, just like that thing about Gentian. Hey, Chris. I'm going to get more comments on this than anything else. I love that poem. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Well, I'll express it. If I write one, I'll express it. Hopefully, thank you. But this is a phenomenal tool. And you're going to find things that aren't straight financial on this as well. You're going to find out about your entire life. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that was an important part. So as we continue on here, the next one.
I'll just touch on this real quickly before we get into markets. So Chris mentioned continuing education being such an important part of what we do. That's through Ed Slott, the foremost IRA tax planning experts essentially in the world. We have Academy for Preferred Financial Advisors. We have Strategic Coach on running a business more efficiently. We have Raymond James as a resource. We have Empowered Wealth and others. And that development day is so important because things are changing rapidly, as we all know. There were some massive overhaul in tax changes starting 2020 with the Secure Act. They're still figuring out the Secure Act, right? We spent an hour on our last development day how to recode things because we found out over the last 6 months a lot of different rules within the Secure Act when it comes to inheriting accounts that Ken will go through in more details. But some of those things a program is not able to catch yet. And as we know, if we take required distributions, what happens if we don't take it out by December 31st? A hefty 50% penalty, right? So some of the new systems aren't able to catch those for an inherited IRA no longer. We thought that it would be a 10-year rule. We're finding out different information depending on your age. So we spent an hour trying to recode things on our end so we can catch it so that doesn't happen to you guys. So that's why all these different groups are so important to us.
All right, enough about us, right? Whew. Sorry. Yes, she said yes. But as we go through, I want to talk about, anybody here interested in the markets? Some perspective, a little bit about them? I mean, we can touch on them, or I can just skip this section, which it's up to you. Okay, we'll go through it. We have 52 slides on the market. I actually am not kidding you, but we're not going to hit them all. We're going to go through a few, and if I get bored with it, I'm totally going to say, let's go to the next one. Okay, are we all good with that? Okay, and if I do, this is one thing I'm very cognizant of. If I hear this, that means your head has hit the table and you're asleep. If you feel that way, just go with it. It's all right, all right? We'll tap you when it's time to wake up. So the markets, they've been a little bit turbulent, but sometimes you write something, you just sit down. In about 90 seconds one year, about 15 years ago or so, I sat down and I penned this. Didn't change it, never changed it. Sometimes it just comes out and you're like, yeah. So we call it market corrections. Ken has a few other names for it, but we're going to start with market corrections. First of all, they're swift and visceral. Anybody feel about this kind of correction? This is long and enduring as well. They come without warning. This is about the point where Ken says this might be also...
It might be the in-laws, right? It might be the in-laws.
Could be your in-laws. Especially when their length of stay is unknown.
Bring the luggage. Not good. Not good.
This isn't true. It says they're not pleasant when they're around. Come on.
That actually is kind of true.
They leave scars on those who react poorly. Market corrections can, right? They're temporary and necessary. They're vital to long-term return, and the last is they're essential to the health of a long-term bull market. It doesn't mean a bull market ends when corrections start. Now, we're in a secular bull market still. It looks a lot like the 70s, 80s. We don't know what exactly will happen, but we know along the way there'll be a lot of bumps and bruises. But we like to come up with this because this is a core part of what we believe and know, and you've seen it about 100 times. So next time I'm going to ask you to come up and present it, okay? And you'll get like several hundred grand bars.
Some of the most dangerous words that we hear once in a while, it's different this time.
Yeah.
Those are 4 dangerous words when it comes to investing. It's different this time. This chart, you can't see it in the back at all, but it just shows that when the markets go down, they usually go back up. Pretty obvious, huh? Right? But we hear that. This is a pivotal moment right now. This is the first correction we've seen in, 10 years? Like this? It's been a while. We've gotten used to opening up our statements. Oh, we made money this month. Oh, we made money this month. Ooh, tough month right now. This is the pivotal moment where your financial plan either goes that way or it can go that way. We see the fatal mistakes. You guys don't make those, which we appreciate you for your faith, patience, and discipline and all that. But we get to see a lot of people. And some people don't always make the right decision. And so this is a very, very critical time. So again, it feels different. Does it feel different? The headlines are different. But I've also heard from stories from you guys that back in the 70s, you had to get in line to get gas. That feels different. I can't imagine having my 4 kids in the back seat, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get gas. That would be crazy. That would feel different at that point in time. So there's a lot of things that make us feel different, but as we study history, there's always been something that would make us feel different. There's always something that would make us feel like we shouldn't be invested. Or, hey, maybe just sitting this one out for a little while may feel good. I've heard that one too. Hey, I'm just going to go out for a little while, and then when it feels better, I'll get back in. It's too late by then. The markets have already moved up before that happens. So that is the annual end of the world. The world is not going to come to an end. Now, it feels differently right now, but again, we've been here before. COVID is a great example, down 34% back in March 2020. That was a fast one. And all of a sudden, at the end of the year, the markets finished up 16% for the year. That shocked everybody. No one expected that one because no one knew what was happening. Now, here we are, down 22, down 24% right now. Who knows how the year is going to end? We don't know. Could be a sharp recovery. This may not be the recession everyone's talking about, or it may be. That's something we don't know, right? But the faith, patience, and discipline for your plan, this is a key time to make those great decisions, which I know all of you will, and we're going to help guide you through that. Sometimes talk you off the ledge. I hear that comment once in a while. Talk me off the ledge, Ken. Talk me off the ledge. And we're here to do that for you. We're here to do that.
We've never had those discussions, have we? I'm looking at certain people.
The annual end of the world also comes in bond land right now, in bonds. We haven't really talked about bonds for a long time. Why? It hasn't really mattered. Interest rates go down, bonds go up, make a lot of money. Well, what's the Federal Reserve doing right now? Anybody know? Raising interest rates big time and fast. I just mentioned before that bond fund down 20%. That's a big number. We're focusing on that right now because it is a good portion of your money if you're in retirement. It's a piece we have to get right for you. It's critical to make sure that your income is there. We probably think about your income more than you think about your own income. Because it's critical to retirement. We think about this stuff all the time. Income, income, income. How do we drive it? How do we protect your money for income? That's something we're talking about all the time.
The next one we have up here is the valuations of the S&P 500. If any of you have seen the newsletters that come from Nick Murray every single month, August does a phenomenal job splitting the idea of the stock market and the S&P into two. The stock market is something that trades wildly, that people report news on every single day. The S&P 500 are 500 of the best companies in the world, continue to innovate, continue to grow, increasing their earnings over time as well. But JP Morgan comes out with a tremendous quarterly update with everything, and we pulled a few of these. We're going to go through all the different price-to-earning ratios for the last 30 years, 20 years. The price-to-earnings ratio at the end of June, it was 15.94, which is under the 25-year average. So with historical perspective, since the late 90s, phenomenally undervalued, but as the market, it's always going to be undervalued, and over time, consistently an upturn as well. With the next slide, we just have a variation of it. Ken mentioned small cap growth, large cap growth. Some of the larger companies that we hear about every single day are down the most temporarily, especially if it's technology or healthcare. We wanted to see, relative to history, how undervalued, how valued are they? And they're significantly undervalued right now. What was extremely interesting when we looked up this one is that right about here in the middle of the screen was 2008. If we remember, that was the last big recession, global financial crisis. To 2020, does anyone remember what happened with the market? We had about a 400% uptick in the S&P 500, yet for most of that time, it was still undervalued. Just really incredible to look at, and then during COVID and others, the economy recovered much faster, became overvalued temporarily, and we're back under it as well.
So there's one more here, but Zach, I'll have you check this one, but I want to go back to this one first, Ken. When we're looking at this, Ken normally has that annual end of the world, and it's for stock. This is the annual end of the world for bonds. This is kind of an amazing one here. As he was showing you before, the worst downturn was 1998. Do anybody remember 1998? Anybody here? Yes, one. Good, that's great. This was down 10%. At one point, down 13%. You've not seen that in your life. This chart goes back to 1976. You've not seen that in your life. There was one other time back here in the early 80s where it was down 9%. Bonds typically aren't that volatile. So we've had historic volatility in bonds as well. They're supposed to be the safe asset class. So that's where everybody feels, oh my gosh, my stocks are down, my bonds are down, where am I going to run? That's where the fear comes in, right?
And then I'll just touch on this one real briefly. We saw this, a very interesting chart, that this is only the sixth time since 1927 where the market actually went down 15% or more to start the year. But the average 6-month return following that has been 27%. Now you can see there's a huge outlier there in the beginning during the Great Depression of 62%. So the median is generally high teens, low 20s. It doesn't mean that the next 6 months, everything's going to be back to where it was. It's just the idea that when things fall quickly, they tend to recover quickly as well.
But this is just showing you typical declines. You've seen it before. 5% happens 3 or more times every single year. It's a consistency, right? 10% or more is about every 16 months of our 132 days. 15% or more is every 3.5 years. Even better though, 20% or more is about every 5.5 years. So about every 5 years we get the chance to buy things at about 20% or more off. And this is not common. So you'll see people who've been in this long enough now to go, hey, things are on sale, it's time to buy. That's you. That's what we want to teach your kids. That's what we want to teach your grandkids. Your whole family should know this, because the good news is financial amnesia is very high in America. People don't know, nor remember, nor pay attention to this, okay? So we want to teach this to you and everybody you know. And the only thing on this one, you've seen it all in your slides, the long-term worst return of stocks historically was 1999 to 2019 at 6% per year for those 20 years. Now wait a minute. Green is bonds, or stocks. Blue is bonds. The worst return for a 20-year period for bonds was 1%. The worst return for stocks for a 20-year period is 6%. That means that stocks have less risk than bonds long term. That brings up the question from you, Chris, I don't have long term. One of my good friends, Bob King, used to tell me this. Bob would come in, he was a HR chief of GE, been there for a long time, came back, he said, Chris, I don't even buy green bananas. You want to talk about a short time frame, right? So just giving you an idea. But if you go back to 5 and 10 years, the risk of stocks and bonds is about the same. So rolling periods of time, you'll find volatility any single year, but longer periods of time, the risk is about the same. And since the return is 3 to 4 times that after inflation, wouldn't you want to have more stocks that beat inflation rather than the things that don't? Maybe. That's all right. It's all right.
I'll touch on this one. This was in your review packet as well. We just wanted to take a historical look at bull and bear markets, how long they typically last. And Chris mentioned in the beginning when he talked about the autonomy of a market correction just in general. And when we look at these, we wanted to see what the facts were. And the average bull market lasts about 4.5 years with a cumulative total return of about 155%. The bear market, just simple definition, the temporarily down market of 20% or more, generally lasts 11 months with a cumulative downturn of 32%. So when we talk about the needed and necessary for the long-term growth, are we willing to endure potentially 11 months, potentially more at times, to go through the prosperity of 4 years or potentially longer to get that return? And when we look and we talk about kind of recently since the global financial crisis, that was a very steep one, last a year and 5 months. But following that, if you don't include COVID with the pandemic-induced one, it was almost 13 years worth of an up market, right? So if the average is 4, what is more than likely going to happen? We're going to have a natural correction in the market, which we've seen. And that was a cumulative total of 400% during those 11 years. And if you include post-COVID, it was another 113%, so almost 500% uptick.
Office.
And then this one is in the review packet as well, but a tremendous reminder. And one of my passions, as you guys have maybe potentially seen with your kids and grandkids, is giving investment 101. I never had that growing up. My parents did a phenomenal job raising me, but I just never really knew anything about investing until I was in the business, right? So a passion of mine is just teaching younger ones of what to do with it. This is what the market means. This is where you put it as far as Roth goes. But this is in our investment 101 packet, this is a big one because we often hear the market since 1930 has averaged 10% per year. So what do people usually assume? Oh, I didn't get 10% this year. What was off? You told me that it averaged 10% since 1930. It's only been within 2% of 10% 6 times since 1930. So it's either much above to equal the long-term average, but it's a tremendous fundamental to teach young investors that you may not get a consistent 10%. You may get 50 one year, and you get minus 10 the next year to equal the long term.
And when Zach says young investors, he means anyone under 80. So what's interesting about these last 2 slides, I could take this in front of advisors and teach this, and they don't know it. You may have seen it several times. It should become fundamental to you, right? I know there's a few people here when I go over this in our meetings, like, all right, Chris, we know. No. I want it to be that simple for you. I want you to be able to get up here, and in your sleep I can wake up, hey, what is this chart? Oh, that's the one that shows that bull and bear markets. They don't last as long as that, because that's fundamentals, right? That's what makes you a great investor. That's what makes the panic calls start to subside. We can have conversations instead, which is great. Anyway, this is consumer confidence. Who here thinks people are super confident right now? I heard this. You're right. We went through the list of things that are going on. And if I'd have told you at the peak in January, hey, we're going to have a war, but I went through the whole list of things, how would you feel about the market? How would you feel in general? Not good. And guess what? The political engine is starting for the next election 2 years from now. Even better, right? That's the bottom. You're getting the phone calls, you're getting the flyers in the mail. Anyway, you go through here and you find that consumer confidence is at its low point since forever, going back to 1971. Why is the market dropping? People aren't confident. And by the way, this was as of June. It's lower as of September, when the Fed became quite hawkish, which somebody will explain here in just a moment when he talks about inflation. But as you look at this, you found some points here back in 75, 1980, 1990. This is your life, right? You remember these dates or these times. March of 2003, 2008 during the financial crisis, during the pandemic, and also now. These are marked points. Pay attention. Be aware. This is what happens. And when it feels like this, you know something good is typically coming. Okay? That's what this illustrates. Now, the next slide I'd like to talk about is inflation. And I'm not going to talk. I'm going to let Mike talk on it.
Thank you. And I do have to apologize. I have just come off of studying 3 hours a night and being as far into the details as I possibly could. So, yes. But, yeah, so kind of jumping in and talking a little bit about inflation and the consumer price index. And it kind of like the gauge of inflation and how that's gotten to the point where it is right now, being at pretty close to really at highs, and how fast it's happened is truly unprecedented. And it really how we got here is a lot because of COVID. And a lot of people blame the stimulus and the different amount of money that was pumped into the market for people to spend. Well, it also had a ton to do with the fact that people were able to maintain their jobs in a lot of cases, a lot more so than they would have in the past. And that's due to technology, due from work from home, all sorts of different things. So people were able to make a wage, and what weren't they able to do with that wage? Spend it. So they were paying off their credit card debt. They were paying off different things. They were saving money. You know, they put the consumer in a point that they were at the strongest that they possibly could be financially. And then as things opened up, all of that extra stimulus from, you know, the savings and everything like that, and the little bit that the government gave, that was all coming into the market at once. Everybody wanted everything that was available. And what happens when there is more demand than supply? Prices go up. So that is what's causing inflation and kind of pushing it to that point. And now there's been other things that have come up with that, trying to keep up with that demand. There's been supply chain constraints. There's been different things happening all around the world. The war in Ukraine, different things like that, that stops this supply. But there's still all this demand. And there truly is still all this money out there because of how financially responsible people had to be because they weren't able to spend their money at that time. So right now, it's really interesting, though. So some of the conversations that we've had and some of the things, and, you know, to bring a little hope to the equation here, last year around this time, we were all being told that we had to start Christmas shopping. You had to get your stuff before December because it wasn't going to be available. Well, this year, you're not hearing that, right? So you're not hearing that you need to Christmas shop now. And I've been told, you know, there's going to be another Amazon Prime Day. There's a surplus of items out there. This could be a pretty good Black Friday. You know, there might be some pretty good sales out there, so watch for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry, what were you talking about again?
Yeah.
So I want to give you one more thing on inflation. I have a client who's in
18%.
They're in plastics. The substrate for the thing they make used to cost 86 cents before the pandemic. During the pandemic with inflation, it went up to 165. It doubled. It doubled. Last week, he paid 45 cents. By the way, inflation is typically followed by deflation. So we got that coming as well as a potential. I just wanted to show you and talk about that. Where you felt it is typically going to be in your groceries, it's going to be in your fuel. This is where you've most seen it because that's something we most are attuned to, right? You know, inflation it's here, it's real. But it's also something Jeremy Siegel, I told you about 2 years ago when we were talking about creating this money. Dr. Jeremy Siegel, who's got a great 4th edition of his new book, Stocks for the Long Run, coming out. That's not a plug. I don't get paid for that, but you should read it if you like it. If you take a look at this, He said there'd be about a 20% increase in inflation over 4 years. Well, we had 5, we had 10, so probably 5 again, and we might be beyond it. And resume back to this normal trend line. We don't know. Predictions are extremely hard to make, as Yogi Berra said, especially when they're about the future.
Well, cash accounts, according to Yogi Berra, cash, which is just as good as money, apparently, according to Yogi Berra. We're going to continue on that theme. As we know, cash feels good. Inflation is even worse for cash, right? Even though if inflation's at, like Chris said, 10, 11, I would argue it's even probably higher than that in some cases, where we're doing food, housing, gas, way higher than that. Cash is eking out 2, maybe 2.5 right now at some banks and credit unions around the way. Cash is interesting. But what do we do with the cash? Do we keep it? You can do that, right? Do we save it? Do we invest in other things? If you want to flip to the next one, what do we do with it? There's options for that. So we all believe, that we believe in having a cushion fund, an emergency fund, a slush fund, whatever you like to call it. That's important to have. Anything above and beyond that gets to be interesting. I-bonds, inflationary bonds. Haven't talked about them for 30 years? Haven't even heard of them. Now we hear about them all the time. They're paying a good percentage right now because there is inflation right now. At some point in time, that's going to go down. But I-bonds are something to consider right now. Also, high-yield money markets, credit unions are paying more, banks are paying a little more. We're starting to feel that. But what I want you to think about, though, is those who have cash out there, maybe not just you guys, but everybody you know, the decision is this. What do we do with it right now? Do we invest it? Do we keep it? I want to take you down just a little bit of an exercise right now, what I think is something pretty interesting. This is going to come out, I think, to you guys in the next month or so. But if you get your pencils out, please, and your paper, I want you to write down a few things, because I think this is going to be interesting. Share values, stock shares, S&P 500, 1969, write down 92.06, please, 92.06. As this comes out recently, the S&P 500 is around 3,900, maybe 36. Write down 3,600. 3,600. That's up 40 times in the last 50 years, just on price alone. Now, some of you say, well, we don't have 50 years. I would argue that most of you are not going to spend all of your hard-earned money because we try to get you to spend your money. But if you think about family planning, that's been a conversation that we've been having for a long time now with you guys is, what's your intent? What's the intent? If this is family money, we do have 50 years. And this matters right now. That's up 40 times. Inflation feels very, very high right now. But 1969, it was currently at 38. The index stood at 38. Today, it's at 297 and rising. That is up 8 times. So stock prices up 40. Inflation up 8. That is something to consider when you're thinking about the cash you have above and beyond your slush fund, is to think about what could this mean long-term for you guys? What could it mean for long-term for your family as well?
And Kent's just talking about stock prices. Add dividend in, it's another 20 times for dividends as well. So it's not there's only not one part of the story.
This is also a time to be very careful. I know you guys aren't going to do this, but people are going to get this sales pitch from somebody. Oh, the markets are down 20%. How does that feel? Doesn't feel great for any of us. This isn't a fun time to be an investor right now. Oh, by the way, this isn't coming from us, but this will come from salespeople in our industry. Oh, by the way, there's a product that will allow you to lose nothing. How does that sound? Sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it? But also what they don't tell you in the same breath is it's going to cap your upside. It's going to cap the 40 times that we just talked about. Be very, very careful of hearing these conversations by people in this industry is, by the way, what if I could show you a way that you wouldn't lose anything? That's too good to be true. That's too good. Just be very, very careful because it's happening more and more right now. They prey on the fear that we have as investors.
So jumping back in, kind of talking a little bit more about that inflation and how it gets fixed, right? So there's a certain amount that can work itself out through the supply chain, but right now there's a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve to make hawkish decisions to reduce inflation. Now, what does hawkish mean? Well, think about a hawk, a literal hawk. You know, it's more of an aggressor. It's looking for prey. It's moving in a way that is aggressive, and that's how it has to survive. And what we've been hearing is the potential of a dovish pivot. And so a dove, a much more peaceful animal, right? A little bit less aggressive. They're very slow to get out of your way when you're driving your car down the road. Different things like that. So the
Driving,
idea.
did you see doves? I'm just thinking about that.
So absolutely. So those are two terms that you guys are going to hear about inflation. And as we're continuing to look at this, they're thinking about things being a little bit more dovish, a little bit more peaceful in the idea of how high rates have already come. Because as you can see, interest rates chase inflation. And for that reason, because as interest rates go up, money becomes more expensive, essentially, right? So you can't just have a mortgage at 2.9% or something like that. New home buyers don't have that luxury. So at that point, there's less money to be spent elsewhere if they're looking to pay for something like a mortgage, big ticket purchases, different things like that, things that have interest rates. The other thing that we're hearing is, credit card debt. Credit card debt's increasing. Well, what goes up with interest rates? The interest rate on your credit card. So there's a lot of different factors out there that make it more difficult to pay things off and make those payments, thus decreasing the money supply and bringing down prices because of the less demand doing so.
I used to fight with Nick Murray on this. I remember when prices go way up, he said, people are going to stop driving in America. I said, you have no idea what you're talking about, old man. People are never going to stop driving in America until they did. And then I learned prices are a driver of economics. Now, what's interesting here is don't gross me. Don't gross me the number. If you make 3% in your money market, you feel pretty good, right? Unless inflation is 15%, and what did you net? -12. That's right. Did anybody say that out loud? That's okay. But you look at that. So you're losing 12%. You just don't see it on paper. That's a good one. We've had enough on inflation, so I'm done with this. I'm going to skip this slide as we go through. But when you look at this, I think you were talking about mortgage rates last time.
Yeah, mortgage rates absolutely gone up. You guys know this, 6% right now, about a 30-year mortgage right now. On a $400,000 house, that's another $500, $600 per month for somebody. That's a decision to make at that point in time. That's a decision. What we're seeing there is the mortgage rates going up. That's really what's happening, right? Is it slowing the housing market down? Maybe not just yet. I don't think we've seen it just yet, but it will. I think it will probably, but we're going to find out. But from 18% that we heard back there, and we talk about a mortgage rate at 6%, that sounds pretty good. But if we got a mortgage and locked in a fixed 30-year mortgage for 2.5%, 3%, 6% sounds terrible. So this is all perspective. This is all the ebb and flow, the natural rhythm of interest rates.
You have a whole generation of your kids and grandkids who bought recently in those levels. They're going to say, remember when? Years ago.
Yep.
They're going to say, remember when I got mine at 2.5. We heard 18. 2.5 sounds pretty good, right? It made it at one point here. There's a new infographic I'm going to bring up on a video. Not right now, but it's the most affordable the house has ever been in tract history was January of this year due to interest rates and income increases. So you look at that, and that's counter to what most people think. Oh, houses are so unaffordable. Strangely enough, that's not true when you look at the facts. So what's really interesting about this one as well is that we had another infographic. Does interest rates actually drive the value of houses? Strangely enough, not really. They may stop going up dramatically, but they tend to even out. So anyway, I find it interesting. You may or may not. There's all sorts of more stuff we can go through.
Here's a good one. Financing options.
Yep.
Before you buy something, if you would like to, please give us a call, because there are ways that we've brought up to you that we've learned in the past on how to finance things that you guys want to buy. RVs, homes, boats. We hear it all. It's awesome stuff. It's fun stuff. There's a couple different ways we can do it. You can use the cash on hand if you want to. There's personal loans. There's home equity lines of credit. Still very interesting right now. The first introductory year is usually pretty good. Then after that, it goes to 4 or 5%, so that's questionable at that point in time. However, a client brought to my attention recently, our attention, and said, if you call them up, call the bank, call the credit union up in the first year, in the 11th month, you say you want to re-up the reintroductory rate, you can for a small fee. That's interesting because some of these rates right now are 1.5%, 1.75%. So that's a pretty good rate right now. That's still a good rate. So if you're thinking about financing something, let us know. The other ways to do it, securities-based lending, which Zach will talk about here in a second. The other way is your portfolio. Right now is a great time. As you know, you've heard us talk for a long time about the 4% rule. Does that ring a bell to everybody here for the most part? Don't spend more than 4% on an annual basis of your overall bucket of money. That holds true when you want to buy something too. So if we're already at 4%, and we want to finance something through the portfolio, now we might be at 4.5, 5, 5.5. That's where it gets to be dangerous. That's what we want to help you guys out to find out, okay, does the portfolio make sense? Possibly. But let's look at these other lines of financing to see if we can optimize your hard-earned dollars.
And Ken briefly mentioned the securities-based line of credit. Has anyone here come across that or found a scenario where that was of use yet? A few of you? So if you have a non-retirement account, one of the beautiful things, and Mike mentioned his gratitude for Raymond James, their relationship to Raymond James Bank, instead of having to liquidate the portfolio, pay taxes on it, and use that for proceeds for a potential purchase of some kind, you can actually just take a line of credit out against your non-retirement account. There's certain stipulations with those. We can go through with you if that makes sense. But we saw some incredible uses of it last year just with the real estate market and purchasing homes. People weren't able to get a bridge loan in time, or there was repayment penalties. There's no repayment penalties on a securities-based line of credit. So. Yep, exactly right. Non-retirement.
Yeah, David's question, it has to be non-IRA. It's true. It's non-IRA assets. Correct.
And there's a minimum amount you can take as well.
Yeah,
there's a minimum amount. You have to have a certain account balance. But the minimum is $70,000 to take out. But if you only needed 20, you could immediately pay the 50 back. Right? So there's no repayments. It's just a really nice tool that we saw in a few different scenarios last year to come into play.
Yeah. We also had a client who came to us who wanted to buy a house in Florida. It was about 2 weeks before Ian. But they came in, and we actually sent it to one of our preferred lenders, those COIs we talked about, and they found that refinancing their home here that was paid off was much better than getting a mortgage in Florida for many reasons. So they actually used a lower rate, easier, quicker to finance here for the house they bought in Florida. So there's a lot of interesting ways that this can be done over time. So we'll move forward on this. So first, Secure Act 2.0, which, by the way, is only half passed. Have you heard something that rhymes with half passed? Drop the P, that's what he said. Our government has this half-passed, and now it's just stuck there. But Ken, what's going on with Secure Act 2.0?
So the big one that matters for most of you in the room right now is that the required minimum distributions out of a traditional IRA, they're talking about making it go from 72 to 75 right now. That's the big one for all of you. Now, for our younger savers out there that are on the accelerated path, 401k matching options via Roth, there's a lot that's on the table right now. But for you, remember your RMDs used to be 70.5, then it went to 72. Now they're thinking about 75. So that doesn't make a difference in our planning. We have more years to plan for you and with you for your family.
It's absolutely true.
But we'll just I'll touch on the first three. Ken will take the other ones. But a lot of you, if you've been on any of our webinars or been with us for a while, you hear about rebalancing quite often. We did a massive study 3 or 4 years ago where we found that depending on a specific market cycle, rebalancing can actually increase 1% of return per year. Now, when we have sustained periods of long-term uptrends, it might only be 0.1. The main purpose of rebalancing is to reduce risk, right? You're trimming back things that have done extremely well. You're buying more of ones that maybe didn't do as well to get back to an original allocation. This year we're incredibly excited about rebalancing. So when markets are up, it's kind of one of those where it's like, man, we don't really want to trim back from that fund that's doing extremely well. During these times, rebalancing is essential. And really going back, if we wouldn't have rebalanced for the last 10 years, what would we have been extremely overweight in? We would have been over large cap growth, those bigger technology companies, and small cap growth as well, the two best categories over the last 10 years. What are temporarily the worst? If our portfolios are temporarily down in the teens, it could be 20, 30. We've also been seeing 40% down depending on the asset class. And also with Chris mentioning alternatives, selling off of those, what are we buying more of this year? Historically, our best funds. So we're extremely excited of rebalancing. Charitable giving, we talked about the different things with the rules changing. The IRS loves to make things unbelievably simple for us, right? So those are increasing. Charitable giving, if you're over 70.5, what can we do at 70.5? Qualified charitable distributions. You can give directly from your IRA to charity and pay no taxes. That's still 70.5, yet all of the required distribution rules are changing, right? So clear as mud on those. With Roth conversions, this is just another incredible year to see. If it applies to you and within your tax bracket, there's certain ordering rules that if you're already taking your required distribution and have to every single year, you can directly reduce it with a qualified charitable distribution, but you can't do a conversion until your required distribution is satisfied. But if that's the case and it makes sense for you, this is a phenomenal year to do it because we talked about those temporary suppressed asset classes. Oftentimes it may make sense to convert those while they're temporarily down 10, 20, 30, 40%. What do they do when you convert them? They grow back tax-free. All right, so this is an incredible year for Roth conversions as well, potentially.
Absolutely. Another planning idea, tax loss harvesting. That's a fancy word for selling investments at a loss. That's what that means. Tax loss harvesting, what does that mean? In a non-retirement account, we typically do this in mid-December for you because at that point in time in mid-December, we know if mutual funds are going to be paying off capital gain distributions. That's Apple being bought at 4 and being sold at 140 inside of one of your funds. Those gains get distributed to us via capital gain distributions. Now, we have ammunition this year. Last year we didn't because everything was up. This year is a different story. So this year in mid-December timeframe, we're going to know if there's going to be a capital gain inside of your personal investment account or if you have a trust account. Those all act the same way. We have ammunition. So we might go in there and sell Fund A at a loss to offset some of those gains. That's going to help you from a tax perspective. But we're also going to go in there and simultaneously buy Fund B in replace of Fund A. So when the recovery does happen, and when it happens, you get the recovery in Fund B, but we get to take the tax write-off in Fund A. So that happens typically in mid-December because we know the most information at that point in time. Income planning is the next one. I've talked about this. We analyze your income more than you think about your income. Your income shows up, but it's a very important piece to your overall investment. That is something we have our eye on keenly right now. When it comes to inheriting money, okay, it is complex. Not only are you going through the grieving process of someone you just lost, now there is a plethora of options you have to make. Then they're irreversible, by the way. And they're getting more complicated. It depends on how old the person was when they passed. It depends when they passed. How old were they? Do we have a 10-year stretch out? Do we have a lifetime stretch out? Oh, by the way, if they're a certain age during the 10 years, we might have to take out annual distributions for those 10 years. It's getting complicated. We have great partners, Ed Slott and Company, tax gurus. We have them on retainer for you guys because it is complicated. We just caught a scenario recently with a client where we had it labeled one way, and all of a sudden, and we started thinking about it. It's like, but the new rules say this. Reached out, we're able to correct it. She now has a life stretch instead of a 10-year stretch. That makes a big difference. That's a pension-like type of income. So that is going on with the inherited IRA rules right now. So complicated. I'm going to a conference recently. Like I said, I'm going by myself. Anybody wants to come, I'll be happy to sit with and talk tax law for you guys for a while.
That's awesome. So one thing I want to do before we go into the interesting facts, one more thing. Anybody here know what the U.S. dollar is doing to foreign currencies? The U.S. dollar has been strengthening on about a 5 to 7 year cycle. Matter of fact, when my wife and I went on our honeymoon 100 years ago, 22 years ago to Spain, we found that the dollar was at about parity with the euro. Matter of fact, we get a discount. It was like 80 cents on the dollar because the currency was new. It's been as high as $1.60. So for what we would buy here in America, it cost us $1.60, $1.70, $2 at one point with the euro, right? Guess where it is today? It's back to parity or less. So us traveling abroad is super cheap. But if you're standing outside the U.S., how does that look? What about the products from the U.S.? It's super expensive for them. So our goods are now becoming more expensive. What's interesting as well is your foreign investments, emerging market, international, anything, has also been at a headwind for 5 years. You forget about that. The currency values goes up 50%. You're losing 50% on your investments to the overall dollar. So it's an interesting part to me. But I want to make sure that you guys understand that as well. Now, you prepared to be blown away? You may want to buckle your seatbelt. Because if you, whatever. So this here is the $100 trillion world economy. Okay? Look at this country here, this called China. The biggest in the world here is the United States. 25.3 trillion. So of the world economy, the U.S. produces fully 1/4 of the world's goods. China's not far behind at 19 trillion, just about 20 trillion. They'll probably pass us up at one time. You'll find countries like Iran, small, Brazil, UK is 3.4 trillion, Germany, 4.3 trillion. India and Germany are about the same. United Kingdom's 3.4. So you're starting to see here, 2 countries predominantly dominating it, Japan at 4.9. Here's what's interesting. Look at the next infographic. So this is the world's population at 8 billion people. Anybody see the biggest country in the world right there? China, right? 1.45 billion. What's right next to it? India, 1.41 billion. That's with a B. The 3rd largest country in the world is what? The United States, 355 million. Now, you want to see something here? See this little country right here? See that? Anybody impressed by the fact that this little tiny country produces a quarter of the world's goods? That's why people are dying, literally, to come here from other countries. This may be a very difficult, political, whatever you insert word, place to live. Just better than all the rest. And that's why they're dying to come across our borders in some form. This here is another illustration. Top 20 countries by ultra-high net worth individuals. Top 20 countries in the world by ultra-high net worth individuals. The United States, over 140,000. The very next country, China, with about 25. Outside of that, I think if you look at this, all the other countries combined don't outsize the state of New York or California. This country we live in here is one of the most prosperous in the world by a long way. Other countries will catch up. That's okay. We may not be number one forever. But we are a country, and this is somebody brought this to me recently, within our borders, we can produce all the natural resources we need for ourselves. So if international relations go to heck, it may be some periods of readjustment, but food, oil, financial services, you go through these leaders, technology, most of it comes from us. Somebody did mention what semiconductors, they come from other countries, except that we're building 5 massive plants here in America. We've learned re-onshoring is a way to do it. Not everything overseas at all costs in case we have issues with storms. Did you hear about the $400 billion ship sinking with the Porsches and the Bentleys or whatever that was? Hope you didn't order a Porsche or a Bentley. If you did, you probably would have told me.
We would have helped you finance that.
You ordering a Porsche or a Bentley? Nope. But if you look at this, and Peter had an interesting, I like bringing Peter up on this one because he'll tell me. Peter, how many people in New York was it that are billionaires? 128 billionaires in New York. More than all but 2 countries in the world. More billionaires in New York than all but 2 countries in the world. Jeff Bezos, who here remembers how old they were 20 years ago? Exactly. Were you 9? 10? Exactly. This is kind of fun. This is the fun part, right? So think about this. Jeff Bezos desired faster, better, cheaper. That's all he decided to start Amazon with. And with books, online. Is now one of the richest people in the world. Happened in 20 years in the country that we're in. Pretty amazing, eh? The speed with which money can be transacted. Somebody said this, if you want to make $1 billion, do something that 1 billion people find valuable, and they'll each pay you $1 for it. I don't know, I gave $1 to somebody for some new idea. Somebody once told me that watching Michael Jordan, he's overpaid. And then they explained it to me this way. Guess what? Would you pay 50 cents to watch him during his career? Yeah. Well, that's what 4 billion people did. They paid him 50 cents to watch him during his career. So bring a lot of value, bring a little value to a lot of people. And that's what America has the opportunity to do. So I want to go back to our country once again. There may be a whole bunch of stuff going on. I want to tie this all together. We are a very small country population-wise. We have a very wide output, which we've expanded over the last 100 or 200 years. That may not continue in the future. We may not see this kind of growth, but we will see prosperity. And for us here in this country, not to appreciate what's going on with that, I just want to put it in perspective what the rest of the world sees. They want to come here. They want to experience what we're experiencing, however horrible we think it is. We cry from the front of the yacht. Oh, my yacht is scratched. Oh. Jeez, it's terrible, right? It's dirty too. Right? It's just not a big issue. My wife is laughing the hardest at that one, by the way. Just so you know. She knows what movie that comes from, too. But if you look at this, this is us in America. We got to turn around. My whole point of this, let's be grateful for what we have, what's going on, the fact that we get to have these problems. We get to have first world problems. We're setting the first world. So with this, I appreciate your attention today. Hopefully these infographics didn't blow you out of your seat. But if they did, I appreciate that as well. One thing I would like to do is, we have a couple of copies of this book, From Strength to Strength. If any of you were in our Love Your Enemies, which really changed the way that I communicate with people that I disagree with, I love them tremendously, but I think that the discourse that we have and the different ideas are what makes us fantastic. This book is also from Arthur Brooks, and there's a couple of fantastic concepts in here as well. For any of you who'd like to read and join us on this, we're going to do a Zoom series of this, 4 different weeks, about reviewing the book Strength to Strength. It's a great piece as well that helps us not just operate as good humans, but maybe helps us understand some of the strengths that we have as we age. Okay? They're different strengths. They're actually more valuable. The world doesn't necessarily understand it, but I want to make sure you do. Because here's the case. We started in this business with numbers. Help me retire, right? Here's numbers, right? I realized the numbers were a small portion of the equation. It's lives. You've invited us into your families. We take that very seriously. The only people that I've added to this team are people who respect, not respect, but appreciate that. So I sit with these people when I pass away, be it tomorrow, be it 100 years from now. These are who are managing my family's assets for the women sitting back there. I want you to understand that. That's how I trust them. That's who we add to the team. If not, they screen them out quickly. So it's a great point. Thank you. We appreciate that with all of you here. We appreciate your time and attention and the fact that you've let us in. We love going to we love being part of your entire process of life to every. We're there for you. We're there to pass these things on after you as well. We just want you to know that. That's a commitment we have. So with that, as you see these people as you walk out the door, walk out with a smile, shake their hand, take a few minutes, we'll talk to them. But I wanted to let you know that's who's here for you. And David, I appreciate that as well. Feedback is super important to us. We want to bring you just what's important and some stuff that makes you go, whew, I'm glad you know that. But we appreciate your time, attention, and most importantly, the fact that you don't phone call us every time the market drops. I do mean that, because we've talked to you so much about this. I get wholesalers all the time going, oh man, I was over at the whatever office, I won't mention it, and they're getting phone calls, the advisors are like, they want to jump out windows. I'm like, oh, interesting. Are you getting a lot of calls? Yeah, about maybe we should buy. When is my appointment coming? What's the natural process? Because what they say, what clients often tell me is, Chris, Ken, Zach, Mike, you said this was coming. So the natural rhythm of the market is like the natural rhythm of life. Is anybody here happy all the time? Don't raise your hand. No. There's times when we're not. There's time when the market hits peaks and time when it hits troughs. That's the natural rhythm of the market as well. I want you to know that. Tom.
What's the latest gadget I should be looking at?
What's the latest gadget Tom should be looking at? Well, I haven't been to Abundance 360 quite yet, but there's some pretty cool gadgets here, some electric cars. There's a few things where the personal drone is actually beginning to be used if you went to the EAA. So if you have silo pads or something on your property, you could probably land on those as helicopters. The biggest thing that's happening right now, there's a restaurant here in Wauwatosa that will serve you. If you want to go to the breakfast place, it's called the Golden, do you remember?
Yes.
Golden Nest. And you will be served by a robot. Anybody want to see something pretty cool? They will serve you a robot. They'll put it on there, brings it right out. I think that's all named Rosie, but it's kind of cool when you should go. So those are the kind of things that are actually going to start to affect your life. Because here's the case. As wages are high and people cost a lot of money, guess what happens? Automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. We're going to want to be served still. That is happening. It's a great question. There's a ton of great gadgets. I'll bring more of those. I didn't bring the technology part this time because I wanted to wow you with these infographic slides. But we'll do more of this. I'll probably do more of these one-on-one, like on a video, and we'll send those out. You can just delete them or watch them. But we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your time here. We really appreciate your relationship as well. Any questions, please feel free always to use us as family as well. Thank you. Appreciate it.